So when you're looking to have a 3D print part mass produced, what is the timeline and what is the sequence of actions that probably is going to occur there in order to get your part made? So in this video, let's go ahead and walk through them. This is kind of the general timeline that almost everybody always breaks, but we try to hold to as often as possible so that you can plan out far enough ahead, because very likely it is going to take longer than what you anticipate. So the very first thing in order to get a 3D print mass produced is quoting. You will have to submit a 3D model with your expected quantity and any of your production specs into a quoting form. For us, it's on the Slant 3D website. Submit it in there. It generally takes somewhere between 1 and 3 days to quote it. We want to go faster than that. Quite frankly, we think it's better if a manufacturer gets back to you in under 24 hours, if not even faster. Someone may reach out via phone so that they can actually discuss it through to you, because that's better than email, or they will just automatically quote it and send you the quote. But the reason for the variation in the time of quoting is it might require that the supplier talk to their suppliers. If you have an odd sort of material or weird material request, we will have to talk up to our suppliers and say, hey, do you have this kind of stuff? Can you get enough over here? How much is that going to cost? Then we put it into our quote before we send the quote over to you. Big note on this. The quote is completely useless if your design is not done. There is this feature called design for manufacturability. If your design is not manufacturable, at the very best, made it much more expensive to produce or made it unproducible. So if your design has not been done, has not been printed before, has not been qualified, has not been reviewed by the team a little bit beforehand, or has not been quoted before, then it may not be done. So you need to be open and ready for potential redesigns of that part in order to make it actually ready to be mass produced. And this is super important. You need to have your design ready to go if you want the rest of this timeline to fall out the way it is. But presuming your design is ready to go, it's been printed before, it's been good, it's been printed through us before, and you're just getting a quote, all right, fine. The quote comes back. You're like, great, that's great. What do we do? If you're good and you approve the quote, great. You're approving the quote with those specs and those deals. Make sure that you read the manufacturing agreement or get one, or there is a clear delineation of the specs laid out. It's going to be printed at this resolution. It's going to be delivered by this timeline. It's going to be shipped by this timeline. This is how many we need minimum to get by there in case the world catches on fire. Those types of things. All of that will be around there, and you need to have that discussion with your manufacturing rep throughout the entire thing. This is really important to have this relationship with the manufacturer, because the manufacturer is an investor in your company. Imagine you order a $100,000 order and then you want net 30 terms. The manufacturer is effectively giving you a 30-day loan on those parts, which means they now have to operate like a bank and evaluate if you are a customer worth doing that with. Sometimes it's net 30, sometimes it's 50% down and 50% on delivery. Sometimes it's all up front. Generally, if you are running a smaller project, the cost will be all up front because it's just easier for everybody involved, and the manufacturer has a lot of small guys, and you have to kind of legitimize yourself if you're a first time through customer. Later on, if you're a repeat customer, then payment terms can become more flexible in order to help your business. Because again, the manufacturer is an investor in your business. If you do well, they will do well. Okay, so the quote has been approved. Payment terms have been allowed. You have been sent an invoice, and whatever payment needs to be done have been done. All right, production starts up. The first thing to be done will be a prototype if it hasn't already been done. If during the quoting process, prototypes were not done, it needs to be done right now to verify that the part is good. Cool. Maybe some redesigns in order to tweak it after the prototype. It can take a few days to up to a week to do a good production prototype. That can be verified either via photos or may need to be mailed to you for testing. If it is an engineering part, you will need to test it until it breaks to verify that it is as strong as you want to and there's no variations in material. Then, once you are done with the prototype, great, we're ready to start doing a production run. The production run starts with like 100 to 1,000 parts that are just printed off, run through the system as it is, through the existing QC, what specs we know that there are, and then those parts are delivered. Good probability that a bunch of those parts will not be what you expect. They may be lower quality than what you intend, or slightly different specs, or something else, because as you ramp up in production, you discover problems that weren't discovered during prototyping. If you make one part, you only have one sample of what goes wrong. If you make 100 parts, you only have 100 samples of what goes wrong. So one thing may have gone wrong, but then if you keep that one thing and then make 1,000, now you have 10 things going wrong. So it is very important to realize that as you scale up, more problems will happen because there's more opportunities for problems to happen. So you do that initial kind of small production run of 100 to 1,000 parts, and you find out everything that goes wrong, and the manufacturer can then update their QC list to say like, okay, this is something that they also want us to check. This is another QC check. It was originally spec'd to say that a spot less than 1 millimeter would be a rejection, but they realized that a spot of 2 millimeters can be a rejection. Great. great, we can adjust that kind of thing. So you make any adjustments from that production run, and now you're ready to ramp up. Generally, the way to lay out the timeline for all of this is that you will have 1 week of quoting where you do a quote. You say that's too expensive. The manufacturer says, well, we can adjust this, and then it gets cheaper, and then you say this, and then the design moves, and so on and so forth. So going through that process can be 1 to 2 weeks just to get a quote. Then you have 1 week for the prototype, and then you can have 1 to 2 weeks for like the mini production run, depending on how much ramp up is and how big that production run is. And then you would be looking at probably another 2 weeks for the actual production run, again, depending on what it is. In mass production 3D printing, it is very often different from traditional manufacturing. If you buy a mold, you're gonna buy 10,000 parts and you're gonna get 10,000 parts, because a mold is not gonna make 100 and then stop and swap out. With 3D printing, it's different. If you order 100,000 parts, we can deliver them 10,000 at a time every month. So the full production time might be 3 years. We need 1 million parts over 3 years. Great, we will produce 10,000 a month for 3 years, or whatever that happens to be. So the actual total lead time will vary, but if you're making the average kind of number of like 10,000 parts in mass production, think of a week for quoting, a week for prototyping, 1 to 2 weeks for mini production run, and then a couple of weeks for knocking out the rest of the parts. That's a general timeline to look at. So if you are thinking you're gonna just jump in and get a part mass produced off demand, it's probably not going to happen because there's so much qualification to be done. It's a transfer of information of what you expect and what you need and what you are used to into a new system. So the manufacturer has to internalize everything you know, from tolerances to designs to cosmetic checks to making sure the material matches, to make sure that the printers are printing the same way and everything else. All of that brain share has to happen. So that onboarding process, you make sure you're getting the best quality parts you possibly can at the best price you possibly can. So it takes time to do that. And the biggest mistake you can possibly make is drop a part on the manufacturer and say, I need 5,000 of them by next week. Very often, a manufacturer, even like us, will just reject the order because there's so much that can go wrong in there to where we can make 5,000 parts in a week very easily, but we don't know what we don't know. And until we go through this full process of verifying, qualifying, doing the QC, then very likely something is going to go wrong. And if we accept the 5,000 as is, we accept all of that responsibility. But going through the process allows us to understand what your intentions are, because the goals for a cookie cutter are different from the goals for an aerospace part. If somebody says, I want it strong, well, great. Do you want it made out of carbon fiber? No. I just want a solid infill. Great. We need to know that. That is one of those kind of subtleties there where the spec of strong doesn't mean anything until the discussion is had. But that discussion takes time and there's a process to be followed. So if you are thinking that you may need mass production, do it now. Get started right now. Order some parts right now. Don't do an exploratory quote. An exploratory quote is somebody sniffing around, but there's somebody who's like, I've got an idea, it might sell. Manufacturers can't engage with that very heavily because, again, they're investors. And manufacturers know that 90% of companies don't make it past the first 2 weeks of the idea. So if somebody is thinking about making something, it's very difficult for a manufacturer to invest a lot of time in helping that person out without just billing for all of it. So you have to have existing sales if you want to work with a manufacturer, and you need to prove out that you know what you want and know what you need. So if you are going through a quoting process for mass production product, make sure it's qualified, make sure you have some sales, and make sure you know how to describe exactly what you need as a baseline, but still have some flexibility to adjust to what the manufacturer needs to do in order to make your part, because however you may have made it before may be different. If you made it with SLA or injection molding before, that should not now be 3D printed with FDM. So hopefully that gives you a layout of how the quoting process, at least here at Slant 3D, generally goes. We can turn stuff around quickly. If you're an existing client and you're like, I need more of the part that I ordered last month, instantly turn you on. That's quick and easy. But if you are a brand new customer who has not made the part before, expect to have to go through this process of quoting, go back and forth, and sharing information so we make sure we can make you the best possible product at the best quality price. Have a great day, everybody.